Morning everyone, welcome back to David Let Go to Hobbies. Right, this MD-11 aircraft, MD-11F aircraft that crashed in the USA, it was a UPS aircraft, and it was an N259Up registration. Now, the problem we have obviously the reason why I'm doing this research is to ascertain how much information they will be able to retrieve from the ground after the crash. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert, but as a non-expert, I feel that they've got a very meticulous job to piece together how the aircraft and what caused it crashed. But what the problems they've got is the fireball that ensued after the crash of the I don't know what the exact amount they were carrying in fuel, aviation A1 fuel. Now, rough estimate was 38,000 gallons of aviation fuel, A1 fuel, right? Not only that, the other thing was it was 144,000 litres of aviation fuel. Excuse me for a minute. You have to forgive me, I've got a bit of a bug, a flu bug, so I'll do my best. Going back to what I was saying, and I've just stuck in a pastel to try and help my throat, and that is they were carrying near maximum fuel capacity. And the problem is, we know what happened. The engine fell off. The fuel was going to the engine. It ignited and burst into flames and was leaving a trail. There wasn't sufficient power, and unfortunately the aircraft crashed. At this point, I'd like to say my deepest condolences and heartfelt sympathy, and my prayers and thoughts go out to all the families and loved ones that were involved. So my concerns is to try and look at it from an aviation photographer's point of view. As because I do aviation photography, meaning aircraft photography, I used to take thousands and thousands of pictures of aircraft, all different types. I might have actually snapped this aircraft landing at a local airport, because we've got a UPS hub not far away from me at an airport. So I've done a bit of research, and that the type of material the aircraft is made of is of various types of material. One is aeronautical grade aluminium with composite and titanium and other materials in their construction of the aircraft. Right? Aluminium or aviation grade aluminium burns or melts at around about 477 C. I don't know if that's true. That's a figure I've come up with doing a bit of research. I might be wrong. Seems a bit low to me, but then again, it is aluminium, which is a softer material, and aluminium will actually burn. How do I know this? Because I've done my ADR about hazardous chemicals and stuff like that, and you learn a lot. And because they were carrying aviation fuel, and which is what the aircraft's engines run on, aviation fuel burns in oxygen around, I believe it was 2030 degrees. With unlimited oxygen supply, it will burn at 2230 degrees. And the problem you've got is two things. One, the melting of the aircraft itself, and the remains of everything that was in there will be consumed by the fire, if not extinguished by emergency services. And obviously time was of the essence to get this fire under control and stopped, so they could fully investigate and recover the deceased, and respect to the deceased, to recover the remains and return to their families, and through the procedures of the coroner and stuff like that, so they can give them a bit, put them to rest. My thoughts go out to all the families involved. It's not nice, especially when you have an aircraft crash like this, where things are outside your control. I make this video because, yeah, I love aviation photography, but I feel for the families and that. But also my point is, as information goes, I want to find out, sorry, I've got a doggy snoring next to me, some facts about what possibly caused the accident. I don't want to speculate, but something quite dramatic's happened, isn't it? But I haven't said it, but could it be sabotage? These aircraft are in a maintenance schedule, and they must have cameras and CCTV systems monitoring all the maintenance, so they can recheck. And I'm not saying, I'm just putting the thought out there. Could it be sabotage? Highly, highly unlikely, if you want my honest opinion. But you've got to rule and process of elimination out. But going back to what I was saying regarding the temperatures of the melting points and stuff like that, obviously when this accident happened and the fireball that ensued because of the aviation fuel burning, my thoughts is there's not going to be a lot left, because that aluminium would just melt. And if they are able to get the fire under control, the biggest problem they had was the amount of fuel. 38,000 litres of A1 aviation fuel is a lot of fuel. That's a road tanker will carry around about 26,000 litres, because that is the capacity to weight. The trouble is, it could be a little bit more, could be between 24 to 28,000. I don't know. It very much depends on the weight, the gravity weight of the density of the liquid in a certain temperature. But that's not too technical. But only that with the aircraft taken off, they will need to know that without going too far into it. It's when you're transporting it by road, right? You don't really need to know that. You just need the capacity of what your vehicle will carry. Because I'm into the road haulage industry, I know these sort of things because I've carried milk and stuff like that. And what I will say is this: with trying to keep it on track, and that is 38,000 gallons of aviation fuel is going to burn, and then you've got, once you extinguish that fire, you've got a very high risk of it reigniting. A small spark or a small warm spark could send that site into another fireball where the gases ignite. It's not the liquid, it's the gases or vapour of the aviation fuel that burns. It's not the liquid itself. So there might be aviation fuel still on the ground, in the ground, that could reignite because of the vapours it's giving off, right? So they've got a hell of a job to try and make this area safe. Yes, they'll be using foam to extinguish the fire and trying to bring it under control, but it's one of those situations you think to yourself, they want to do the investigation, but they've got to do it in stages. As I say, I'm no expert, but what I'm trying to ascertain is the problems they're going to have. And the longer that fire was burning for, the higher risk of the metal actually melting, all the materials melting. Obviously, being respectful, how do I put this? It's not really an easy way to put it, but the crew would have been incinerated. If not, I hope not, and they got them back intact, but it's a horrible situation to face, and my thoughts go out to the loved ones. And with all due respect, I'm trying to be tactful as best I can. But going back to what I'm saying, the reason I want to make this video is to try and highlight the factors that I see and how it affects me and what my thoughts are. Everyone's different. We all have our own opinions, me included. But from two to three aspects, right? The first is from the aviation hobby as a photographer. Two, as an ADR driver, which is a hazardous chemical driver, and the temperatures aviation fuel can burn at. And because it's in an unlimited air supply, meaning there's free air supply all around it, it will burn at a higher temperature because it can draw all that air in and continue to feed the fire. There's a thing called a fire triangle, right? And each part of that triangle, if you take one part away, right, that will it be fuel, heat, oxygen, yeah, it will cease to catch fire. But you need to eliminate one of them to stop the fire or prevent the fire from happening. Well, as we see here at the crash site, you're going to have heat because the aircraft's crashed. You can have oxygen because there's abundance all around. And then you're going to have the fuel, which is the aviation fuel. So, emergency services are trying to extinguish the heat and to reduce the reignition possibility by smothering the fire in foam. So, technically, it's a hard job, and they've been trained for this sort of thing time and time again. So I also like to say my sincere gratitude for the emergency services. Also, the National Transportation Safety Board for their hard work and to try to bring everyone's up to speed and trying to do their job, and with much gratitude and love and thankfulness from now. I think everyone was involved and is being affected by this. So, from my point of opinion, from the other side of the pond in the UK, is, you know, as an aviation photographer, it's tragic to see these events. And you know, when you see a bird strike on an engine, there's nothing left of the bird, but it can do significant damage to the engine. It depends on the size of the bird. It can cause an engine to flame out. It can cause aircraft to crash. So it's not good. Aircraft engines are tested so much. They're tested with the saturation, the amount of water that goes through the engine. It's unbelievable the tests they do. I'm not a pilot. Won't get me in an aircraft. But going back to what I'm saying with the aviation fuel and the melting points of the materials, if they're able to bring the fire under control, to bring the heat down of the fire, they will have some chance to piece together and do a proper investigation once the area is safe to try and I don't know how they do it, but it's going to be an amazing piece of investigation. These experts that are doing this, I take my, hat off to them and say, good on you, because anyone that's into that sort of thing deserves a lot of credit and gratitude. So from my point of view, is that could it have been avoided? How did it happen? I mean, the aircraft was 34 years old, and it must have been inspected. It must have gone through rigorous inspections and tests and upgrades and body examinations of the aircraft structure. As I say, I'm not an aeronautical engineer, and I don't know what these aircraft maintenance schedules are. But when you've got something like that flying across the sky, you would hope that it's sort of safe. But this is another thing, when you're on the ground, you're not going to fall thousands and thousands and thousands of feet. And these people have lost their lives. It's so sad. As I say, for the pilots and everyone involved. But going back to what I was saying regarding the aviation fuel, what temperature it burns at, and the temperature of aluminium or aviation grade aluminium, it'll burn at a lower temperature. 3 times lower than the burn temperature, or actually 4 times lower than the actual burn temperature, or ignition temperature, the actual burn temperature of aviation fuel. But it would have been higher because they're limited oxygen supply. But going forward, obviously, the way I see it is this. they're going to go over that crash site with a fine-tooth comb, trying to piece everything together. And the information they released so far regarding, I can't remember what the name of it is, when they do the walker up the runway, and trying to pick every single little piece of information up, of debris, and to how minute or small it may be. You know, it's trying to prevent this thing from happening again. And what concerns me is should there be a limit of aircraft age? Well, I've got to give them the benefit of the doubt. If this aircraft was 34 years of age and it had been flying through that time with millions and millions and millions of air miles, right? They must be doing something right. So, in one respect, the age is perhaps immaterial because the amount of inspections and maintenance and schedules and everything that's involved. Bear with me. Sorry about that, coughing. So it makes me wonder, you know, was the aircraft engine that fell off, was it because obviously engines are designed to fall off under certain conditions? So was one of these parameters met and the engine detached? Because far as I know, the pylon that holds the engine to the aircraft was still intact or partly there on the aircraft, right? But there was another video talking about number one engine having a compressor stall when you get that pop, pop, pop with a flame out the back. As you can see in the video, you can see that happening on number one engine, but number three engine was not there. It was all that was coming out was the fuel, which was igniting, and need I say more? So you got number one engine with a compressor stall, and number two engine, did it have maximum thrust? It would have never been able to lift off a fully laden 38,000 gallon aircraft with a full payload, and that's why I think wouldn't have been able to climb. Maybe with two engines fully functioning, but with number three engine completely missing. I should imagine the engine would probably weigh about 7 tons. I don't know the exact weight. But there's a lot of information here which is unanswered. We just don't know. But I obviously am not in a position to find out all the facts. But from my point of view, it's this. What caused the engine to fall off? Was it a complete catastrophic engine failure? Had it had the turbo fan blades suffer metal fatigue? Was it repeated bird strikes? Was it a foreign piece of debris that got into the engine and caused it to fail? Was it sabotage? We don't know. And then number one engine was failing. So number three engine had fallen off, possibly because the design, because the engine was disintegrating and causing significant overload stress to the pylon, and the shear bolts, or whatever they're called. I know there is a word for them, I can't remember the exact name. Pins, I think, or some sort of pin, and they've sheared. That's the design. So that the engine broke away from its mountings and fell to the ground. It's a safety factor. So they've lost that engine, and the other engine could have been damaged through the disintegration of number three engine across underneath the fuselage, or even the turbo fan blades transversing through the belly of the aircraft. I mean, you can imagine the blades rotating at up to about 11,000 RPM, and one of those blades, which is going to be a material which is very, very, very hard, and it'd be like, there's not much going to stop it. So going through an aluminium body or a composite body of the aircraft is going to go like through a knife through butter. So it's got the velocity to completely shred the belly of the aircraft, or completely transverse underneath the aircraft across into number one engine to damage that. And possibly that's why number one engine was failing and had a compressor fail. I do not know the details. As I say, I'm not an aeronautical engineer, but if that's the case, it leads me to think something, if it's not a maintenance issue, right, is it an age-related issue? Because I wouldn't be surprised if it's had new engines, this aircraft, at some point. And these engines are inspected, they're tested, they're run up, they're powered up, and they're tested and tested and tested. I have no doubt about that. But, I mean, when you actually think how vulnerable that aircraft is at that crucial moment, and you've got that catastrophic failure and the removal of number three engine and number one engine failing and not giving sufficient thrust, unfortunately there's not a lot could be done. And I think they would have known that, so sad to say, but they would have tried their best. But the trouble is also, when you get that to that V1, and that is at the point, you're at that crucial airspeed, and you're committed, and you rotate. Those poor souls. Those poor souls. Because they're trained to take off. I mean, you've got industrial areas straight in front of the runway. It's not like you could sort of easy aircraft down into a sort of field. But there's another recommendation. Perhaps at the end of the runway there shouldn't be buildings. Perhaps runways should be, in this sort of scenario, there's like an aircraft crash zone. Perhaps that's an idea. I don't know. It just perhaps if we hadn't had those buildings and the aircraft and the pilot training was designed to lift off at V1 and rotate at a given airspeed and stuff like that. Perhaps if they had that opportunity, they might have still lived. Highly unlikely, but as an option, there is possibilities. And I'm not trying to distract from the seriousness or anything like that, but it leaves you, if they didn't have those buildings at the end of the runway, perhaps the aircraft would have been able to perhaps been brought down and might have survived. It's a horrible thought. Whatever way you look at it, it's horrible. So, a few things to take away from this video. One, right? Could it have been sabotage? Two, if those buildings and the structures at the end of the runway, because aircraft will either land or take off, and depends on the wind direction, right? They will land into the wind and take off into the wind. Again, it depends very much on the wind direction. Obviously, you can tell what the wind direction is by the windsock. The windsock is like an orange tube on a pole that, when the wind blows, it goes up, and you can see the direction of the wind blowing into it and where the sock is coming out. Just like an orange round tube, bigger at one end, smaller at the other, right? And that basically gives the wind direction. And obviously, they can tell by how much wind force there is in speed of knots to how high the windsock is lifted up. And there's certain degrees of that in certain positions to the wind speed in knots. Because I'm an aviation photographer, I was interested in that sort of thing. But not distracting from what I was saying. One, was it sabotage? Two, was it aircraft age? Right? Three, if there was no buildings at the end of the runways, right? Might this aircraft have survived? Yes, it would have crashed. There might not have been so many fatalities, but there is a possibility that the crew might have survived and they might still be with us today. It's horrible thoughts, but it is a possibility that we might have not had deceased crew and people on the ground. I'm not trying to distract from any seriousness, but I'm trying to put together some options that might improve aircraft and safety at the end of the day. And I think I would rule out it was possibly sabotage, right? Two, I'd probably rule out age of aircraft, but not, I'd say the age, probably not, because the maintenance schedule and the rigorous testing and inspections, right? Sabotage, highly unlikely, but it's a possibility. And thirdly, a crash area at the end and beginning of runways, right, could have saved the aircraft and the crew. What do you think? I know it's a long video, and thank you for your time watching it, but it's got some really good points. I think that the National Transportation Safety Board might take into consideration in the USA. And I should say, as a closing thought, not many airports, unless they're in the middle of nowhere, will have that safety zone in front or behind the runway to allow aircraft to, if there's a failure of something, that there's a chance, there's a lesser risk of fatalities. Anyway, as I say, what do you think? What's your thoughts? Am I right? Am I wrong? What's your opinion? So thank you very much again for your time and watching the video. But last but least, would you consider subscribing to the channel? The reason why I say that is because it puts these videos in front of people like you that are interested in finding out the truth, all aspects, and to have your say and what your thoughts are, and to make it interesting for everyone. So thanks again, take care, and again, my deepest condolences, prayers and thoughts to all the families and loved ones that are involved. Thank you.